Welcome into episode 93 of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
I'm Nicholas Raba.
And I'm Nicholas Tacek.
Security and insecurity. Sounds like a Jane Austen novel, but is in fact what we're hitting on today's show. It's really weighted towards lack of security. I'm going to spoil it for you now. Items on today's list: the Zipperdown vulnerability, puppy pictures preempt privacy, the returning Spectre of Spectre, eFail, worst dating site ever, and finally, we do end on a positive note. What does Apple know about you? It really is fairly positive, but let's wade through the bad bits first, starting with the Zipperdown vulnerability.
Yeah, there are rumors and rumblings about a new vulnerability in iOS that could impact 10% of the apps out there. Details remain a bit sparse, but here's what we know so far. The vulnerability, named Zipperdown, was announced by Pengu Lab. They haven't released specific details on the vulnerability, but they describe it as a common programming error rather than something wrong with iOS itself. The vulnerability requires a specific set of circumstances. First, the attacker must be in control of the Wi-Fi network that the target device is connected to. Second, the vulnerable app must be running outside of the built-in security sandbox in iOS. If those two conditions are met and the vulnerability is exploited, it could allow the attacker to run illicit apps on the target device. We've said it before and we'll say it again. It's not a good idea to jailbreak your iOS device. You're just opening yourself up to vulnerabilities such as this one.
Well, that's a weird one. So we don't know exactly how it works, but what it would do is it would allow an attacker, if you had a jailbroken...
to run arbitrary apps.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you had a jailbroken phone and you were on their Wi-Fi, then they could install other apps on your phone and run them. And that was the thing, is like when I was looking at the story and it was talking about 10% of the apps, I was like, oh, that's got to be a huge number. And then they said it was like 18,000 apps or something like that, and that it was out of 180 or 160,000 that they reviewed. And I was like, I think there's more apps than that for iOS. And it turns out they were talking about jailbroken apps that work on jailbroken phones versus ones from the App Store. So again, unless you've taken some steps already to negatively impact the security of your iOS device by jailbreaking it, you should be okay here. Because the other thing it relies on is the coder having messed something up. Because I think you said...
Yeah, and that's the part. They said they're contacting impacted developers to get a fix in place, and they said it's a common programming error. Well, there's lots of those. So since they haven't been more specific, it's hard to tell exactly what common programming error is at the root of this problem.
And I guess the other question I would have then too is, so we're not talking about apps that are, well, I guess we could be talking about apps that are built specifically for jailbroken devices. I mean, are we talking about just sort of cracked, and so you can get these apps for free, and so they're contacting, I don't know, ABC developer who also happens to be a big developer that sells legitimately in the App Store, but somebody has cracked them and they've made a mistake that has now made this possible? Or are we talking about somebody that's writing specifically for the jailbreak community?
I think the way I was reading it was specific for the jailbreak community.
All right. Wow. Yeah, I look forward to there being more information about this, because while it sounds potentially scary for a very small number of people, it's also confusing enough that I'm not sure. I mean, obviously it's to be taken seriously because security concerns are, but I don't know how. I'm not losing sleep over that one. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay, good. Let's talk about one that would probably be very popular with Peter Piper. Puppy pictures preempt privacy.
Yes. Back in episode 67, one of our shows covering iOS 11 security, we talked about how Apple was limiting access that third-party apps have to your photo library, and that was a good thing. So today we're going to talk about why it's a good thing that Apple's limiting access and what can go wrong when apps do have unlimited access to your photo library. Reporting recently for Motherboard, Jason Kobler admitted to an embarrassing mistake. He had traded his privacy away in exchange for a video of a puppy. Basically what happened was that Jason had previously downloaded the Google Photos app years ago, but he specifically declined to grant it access to his photo library on iOS. He didn't want Google having all of his pictures. Because when Google Photos does have permission to access your photo library, it automatically uploads all of your photos to Google servers and proceeds to categorize them by running them through a gauntlet of image and facial recognition algorithms. So the situation was this. While waiting for a concert to start, and after having imbibed a few adult beverages, Jason texted a friend asking for a picture of a new puppy that they had just gotten. And the friend replied with a video of said puppy, which they had uploaded to Google Photos. So Jason clicked the link, and iOS automatically opened the Google Photos app that he had previously installed on his phone. Since you can't use the app even to view someone else's photos or videos without granting it access to your own photo library, Jason made a split-second decision, and he was using drunken logic, and he gave Google Photos access to his photo library. He apparently really wanted to see that puppy video. And he actually said the puppy video was really cute, and I don't know if it was worth it, but he watched the video, and then the concert started shortly thereafter. He put his phone away, didn't think about it till the next morning. And now, let's take a quick break, because it's important to note that if you do not have the Google Photos app installed on your iOS device, you can click a Google Photos link from a friend, and you can view the photo or video in your web browser without needing to hand over access to your own photo library. It just so happens that iOS will launch a company's app if it uses a custom link, rather than opening the website like it would if the app wasn't installed. So in this case, the Google Photos app just refuses to work unless you agree to give Google all your photos and videos. And since he already had the app installed, that link was only opening the app. It wasn't letting him open in a web browser. So that aside, back to the story. In the morning, Jason had an alert on his phone that it had successfully uploaded 15,000 images and videos from his phone to Google servers.
Congratulations.
So he obviously wanted to get those photos off of Google servers as quickly as possible, except there's a limit to that. You can only delete 500 of them at a time. So it took him 30 of those times, dragging, clicking, deleting. And even then, they're sitting in a special trash file in case you accidentally delete a photo and you want to get it back. So they're going to sit there for 60 days before they're being permanently deleted from Google servers. So this goes to show how one momentary mistake or lapse in judgment could have a lasting impact when it comes to the privacy of your data.
Can I ask what specifically our concern is here? I mean, I do not share that kind of thing with Google. In fact, I was just going over some photos and videos that somebody sent me from an event the other day. While you were telling this story, I was like, wow, did that happen to me? But I don't have the Google Photos app on my phone. So, I mean, it just started playing it from the server rather than,
exactly.
Hey, let me see all your pictures, right? But I guess the question I have is, so Jason specifically, I mean, is his concern that then bad guys are going to have access, or is he, like a lot of us, myself included, just trying to keep as little information about myself from Google?
Yeah, exactly.
Or as much information from Google as I can, not wanting to share everything about my life with Google.
Exactly. He doesn't trust Google. I mean, a lot of it's the algorithms. It's all computerized, and it's not really people looking at your photos. But you don't necessarily want to be giving all of those photos to Google, just on principle of the matter. So I think that was just more of his own personal view on privacy and who his data belongs to and all that other stuff. But again, this was a case more of the app only works if you allow it access. He still had it installed even though he wasn't using the app. And it was just kind of a confluence of events that resulted in almost like an accidental exposure of his pictures to Google, I guess. It was kind of, it wasn't... Normally, if someone's installing the Google Photos app on their phone, they're doing it intentionally, and they're going to grant Google access to the photos, even though it's a little weird, I guess. But and Apple has made some steps in iOS 11. There are the new options for developers to only request a specific album or access to a single photo at a time. But I believe it's still possible for apps to say, oh, I need access to everything, and if the user says okay, then the app has access to everything, and it can do essentially whatever it wants, so that it can upload all the photos to a server. So in this case, it's, we expect that Google would most likely be responsible with the data. They take security seriously. They wouldn't be selling it to third parties, hopefully. But if it wasn't Google, if it was some other app and you accidentally granted it access to your photos and you don't really know what they're doing with it, they could be uploading to their own personal server. If it's some no-name developer who's really weird, you don't know that. So that's a reason why it's important to be careful with who you're granting access to your data to.
And who knows, maybe with all that data, all those pictures, after it's all mined, maybe Google could send better ads to Jason. I mean, if he takes lots of pictures of dogs, he'll probably see a lot more dog advertisements going on.
Hey, Jason, rumor has it you like puppies. Yeah.
Jason, don't click random dog links when people send them to you either.
Well, it wasn't random, though. That's the thing. He did ask his friend for it. That's right.
I know, but we know Jason likes dog stuff now, so.
Yeah, what's interesting, though, is he could actually start getting phone calls from Google Duplex without realizing it, saying, hey, we're having a party at the puppy park later today. Can we put you down for U+1? Hey, let's move on to something else. An old favorite, an old chestnut, a returning friend. Neither a favorite nor a friend. The Spectre of Spectre.
Yeah. Remember the Spectre vulnerability? The site meltdownattack.com sums it up pretty quickly, and it says Spectre breaks the isolation between different applications. It allows an attacker to trick error-free programs which follow best practices into leaking their secrets. In fact, the safety checks of those best practices actually increase the attack surface and may make applications more susceptible to Spectre. Now, it sounds scary, mostly because it is scary. We discussed it in depth in episode 73, and now, 20 weeks later, it's back in the news. Okay, so let's go back to February. Back in February, Intel announced that it was expanding its bug bounty program to specifically look for more of those Spectre-style vulnerabilities. It appears that they have found one. Now, this new variant, which is dubbed Variant 4, follows the same model as previous variants of Spectre. It uses something called speculative execution to expose data through a side channel. Basically, the computer will try and think ahead of actions that you might, or a program might take based on what it's seen so far. And it will go ahead and kind of go down that path. And if it turns out the program wasn't going to go that way, it was going to go the other direction, it's easier for the computer to say, oh, okay, and go the other direction. It saves milliseconds of time. And when you stack that on top of each other, it can save a lot of time executing programs. And it's why processors can be so fast, essentially, to sum it up easily. And this vulnerability would allow an attacker to take advantage of that to essentially get data it shouldn't have, which could be passwords or other sensitive data.
That's because it's picking up all those possibilities, right? When your computer,
Yes, exactly.
When your computer thought it might be knowing where you're going, or basically went down 5 paths, the vulnerability would allow a bad guy, theoretically, to grab all of those possibilities and from that glean information about you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
And the scary part about the new variant is that it apparently works in a language-based runtime environment. Those are commonly found in web browsers, so think JavaScript. It's everywhere on the web. Now, there's good news, other good news, bad news, and other bad news with regards to this new variant. The good news is that Intel hasn't seen any evidence of successful browser-based exploits. The other good news is that many of the same patches that were made for earlier variants of Spectre should help mitigate the threat of Variant 4. The bad news is that the upcoming BIOS and software patches are disabled by default, because it will result in a 2 to 8% performance hit. And the patches that have come out so far have resulted in a varying degree of performance hits. The computer essentially has to slow down, because if it goes faster, then vulnerability, bad stuff happens. Okay. The other bad news is that all of these patches and fixes are essentially just temporary band-aids. Due to the fact that this is a hardware bug at the very heart of it, it simply is not possible for a permanent fix to be patched in after the fact. Complete immunity would require an overhaul of the actual hardware chips themselves, and that won't happen until Intel releases the next generation of their CPUs.
Is there, forgive me for being so ignorant about this, is there a time frame on that?
I don't know. Didn't we hear rumor that Apple was just going to create their own chips and go a different route? So we wouldn't have to worry about a time frame?
That rumor's been out there for a while. But of course, you still have to worry about it because, there's your mom who refuses to get rid of her Windows PC and your uncle who refuses to get rid of his Windows PC. And even if he's going to upgrade, he's not going to suddenly, decide that he wants to learn a Mac at this point. He's going to go ahead and upgrade to an expensive, super fast Intel machine, which brings me back to my original question. Do we have any idea when this is actually going to be fixed?
It was last time I looked at it, it was still up in the air. That was a while ago. I know they've got stuff in the works, but I mean, we're talking. The reason they're doing, let me go back. The reason they're doing all these little Band-Aid patches is because they know that the chips aren't ready yet, and even if they were ready, they would be expecting all these customers, all the companies that bought their products, people who are running servers and tons of servers, lots of hardware. All those machines would need to be replaced. Mm-hmm. And that's going to cost a lot of money. So it's still going to have to fit into the essentially the budget cycle of any of these companies. When were they budgeting for replacing their hardware? Because if that doesn't mesh up with when these new CPUs come out, they're not necessarily going to upgrade right away. And Intel realized that that's the reality situation, which is why they worked really hard at doing what they could do for these patches. But because it is a flaw that's in the architecture of the hardware itself, it's not something where software can necessarily change it. You're talking a physical piece of hardware that has a problem.
That's just amazing to think about, because you're right. All of those companies are going to have to upgrade. They're going to have to replace it. And then you say it's going to cost a lot of money, and it's not going to cost Intel a lot of money. It's going to make Intel a lot of money, actually. It's going to cost all of those companies a lot of money. And yet, with the exception of maybe what their CEO maybe did ahead of everybody else and finding out about Spectre and Meltdown, you really can't even say that Intel did anything bad here. I mean, they were trying to, it's a great idea. It's a great idea, except when it turns into a bad idea.
And the other part of this is that I think this is pretty much the first real major hardware like architecture flaw that we've seen. I'm sure there's been smaller things, but this is the first one that's had like such a worldwide global impact on so many millions of users. And so it's kind of uncharted territory. All these companies are doing what they can right now, but there's no plan in place. There was nobody thought of this necessarily outside of maybe some speculative attacks. This wasn't something that was considered a reality before this. So I don't think that there's any real roadmap going forward at this time as far as how you're exactly supposed to deal with this in the best way. And they're essentially doing what they can with the resources they can until they get the fix in place in actual hardware.
Right. It's like back when we thought smoking was healthy, or when we thought smoking might be healthy. But here's the thing. You find that out and you can quit smoking. You find out that computers don't work the way we always thought they did. We can't quit computers. It's easier to quit smoking than it is to quit technology because it's just everywhere at this point. Sorry.
And wait, Ken, you said that Intel was going to make a lot of money when this new hardware is out. It's not like the automotive industry where they're just going to do like a recall on it and replace everybody's chipsets for free?
Nope.
I'm petitioning that right now.
You do that. And I'll use the fake name that I use on online petitions because I don't want to give that kind of information away, but still. And no, I don't use a fake name on online petitions. I just ignore them. Hey, we do have another story that we want to hit. eFail, which, contrary to my comment earlier, is not the worst dating site ever, though I do contend it would be a really bad name for a dating site. What is eFail in actuality?
Well, we haven't discussed encrypted email options in depth before, and we should probably do an episode on them. That being said, today's story shows that even systems built with security in mind in the first place can still contain serious flaws. A group of German and Belgian researchers recently released their findings on a serious security issue they found with PGP and S-MIME, email encryption schemes. The security flaw, dubbed eFail, can occur when an attacker is able to intercept your encrypted email and alter how the message will process HTML elements such as embedded images in the email. The attacker then sends the now altered message along to the original intended recipient. When their email program decrypts the message, it loads the multimedia components through the maliciously altered channel, allowing the attacker to grab a plaintext copy of the email. Now, obviously, this type of attack requires the attacker to already have a high level of access to the intended target in order to intercept the encrypted emails so they could be modified en route. However, since most people who actually take the time and effort to use an email encryption system like PGP likely have something they want protected and kept secret, this extra effort on the part of the attacker would be well warranted. At this time, the best suggestions include patching encrypted email plugins as security fixes become available, as well as disabling the option for formatting and displaying HTML content. Basically, users looking to maintain the security of their encrypted emails should only be relying on plain text content of the message, without any fancy formatting or content such as images loaded from external servers or anything.
This actually comes up from time to time, doesn't it? It seems like there was something in Apple Mail a while ago where it was suggested that people disable the, maybe I'm thinking of like automatically open file or something like that. And basically turning off these bells and whistles is something it feels like we have to do every now and then when vulnerabilities like this pop up.
Yeah, I mean, the devil's in the details with a lot of this stuff. When you go from something like a plain text message where you're not doing a bunch of other kind of code in the background and grabbing resources from external sites, it's a lot easier to say, okay, this is the original message that was sent. When you start adding stuff in, formatting, external images, content, that kind of stuff, it's just opening up more of an attack surface, more avenues that the attackers could take to try and break the security on whatever system you're using.
Yeah, but plain text emails are so plain. I mean, they're boring. If you're trying to sell something, seriously, if Amazon just sent me a list of things, it was like, hey, we have this special deal for you, as opposed to putting the picture in front of me. You know what I mean?
And I really do adore your X-Files animated thing in your signature. That it makes me feel good reading to the end of your message.
I like to include a little GIF and GIF of Scully and Mulder, running across a darkened plain in the middle of the night. I love how you just made that up. Now people are like,
I was gonna say, I'm like, I don't remember seeing that. Am I not reading emails carefully?
Yeah, I know. People who know me are listening to this going, why doesn't he send me those? That's just...
I'm feeling left out.
I know.
You're going to start receiving a lot of emails with those little animated things at the footer now.
It's cool. I've got 3 of your email addresses. I will forward each and every one of them to all 3 of yours. How will that be? Hey, we do want to end, and I love that we can do this because so often on this show, we can't really end on a positive note. Today we can. Let's talk about what Apple knows about you.
Yeah, let's get started with the good news. Apple doesn't know as much about you as you might think. Back in episode 85, we talked about what kind of data Facebook collects for each user and how to check your own Facebook data records. This time around, we're going to shine the spotlight on Apple. Does Apple's public commitment to user privacy mirror their internal data collection practices? Well, in early May, Zach Whitaker, security editor for ZDNet, decided to contact Apple and ask for all of the data they had on him. Now, all this data went all the way back to 2010 when he purchased his first iPhone. So, a number of years of data. Facebook, Google, and Twitter all have automated tools to generate an archive of the data they have on you. It usually takes less than an hour from the time you request it till the time you have your data archive. But those data archives generally aren't very small. They contain tons of information and range from hundreds of megabytes all the way up to gigabytes in size, depending on how much data a company has on you. Apple, on the other hand, didn't appear to have an automated system in place for these type of data requests at the time that Zach requested it. So it took them just over a week to send Zach all the data they had collected on him. So how much data did they have on Zach? Gigabytes, right? Drum roll, please. 5 megabytes. That's it. As Zach noted, that's about the equivalent size to a single high-quality photo taken with his iPhone. So not very big at all. And the data consisted of a couple dozen Excel spreadsheets, which mostly contained metadata, such as who he messaged or called on FaceTime and when he placed those calls. Any of the data collected for use by Siri, Maps, and News is done so anonymously. Apple has no way to tie that data to an individual user, so it's not included in your data archive because Apple simply doesn't know whose data is whose, and that is a good thing. Some of the other data that Apple collects might not be present in your own data archive. It's just, this is kind of the list of things they can collect. It includes basic account holder information, such as your name, address, phone number, and Apple ID. Logs of every time one of your devices downloaded data from iCloud. Now, please note that doesn't include the actual data itself. It's just timestamps. Logs of every time one of your devices interacts with your iCloud email account. Again, doesn't include copies of the emails themselves. A history of all of the devices and accessories that you've bought from Apple, including detailed information such as device serial number, whether or not the device is unlocked, unique networking identifiers for Bluetooth, Ethernet, and Wi-Fi connections. All of your interactions with AppleCare for product support issues, including information on any repair requests that you've made. Warranty information, including whether or not you have AppleCare for your device, and when it expires if so. A log of every time you've logged into iTunes and from which specific device. Information on all the times you've played or interacted with Game Center. A log of every time you visited your Apple ID page on the web, and a log of every time you've reset your password. Records for every song you've ever uploaded to iTunes Match, or downloaded from iTunes Match. A complete record of your download history from iTunes, including apps, songs, movies, and information on which device the item was downloaded on. Again, this is just the name of the apps, songs, movies, etc. It's not the actual files. And Apple will be rolling out an automated system for users to download their own data archives later this year. I believe they're starting to roll it out in some countries in the EU.
Well, actually, as we record this, it's been, well, as people hear this, because as we record it, we're working a little bit ahead. I think it went live yesterday as we record this, but by the time people hear this show, it'll be like it's been live for 2 or 3 weeks in the EU, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and then 2 other countries that I can't remember that are not EU member nations, but that are European. Because of course they're trying to get ahead of GDPR, and part of that is making sure that people can have access to this information so that they can tell Apple, hey, you need to fix this, or you just need to delete it entirely. But though it's not required in the States or any other part of the world, it's just required in the European Union and those other countries. It is something that Apple has committed to rolling out worldwide. Eventually. I don't think they've given a date on it, but it's something that's supposed to be coming for everybody relatively soon. As always, we've just covered the very beginning of each of these stories. If you'd like to know more about any of them, links are available in one place, securemac.com/checklist. Now, links are available other places as well, but then you'd have to chase them all over the place, and that just seems silly. We've got them all together for you in one place, securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you'd like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.